Okay, so first of all, a warning. This is going to be a little bit more of a narcissistic video log than usual, mostly because I'm going to talk about my own experience a little bit here. But before we get started, what do you think of the beard? If you've seen me before, you know I didn't have one. I had the flu for a few days and didn't shave, and then I thought, well, I'll try it out and see if I like it. I asked my wife, "Does it make you look old?" She said, "Dude, you are old." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "But at least now you look like a cool old person." And I said, "How do you know? You're not that young either." But anyway, okay, that's beside the point. I probably won't keep it. But anyway, the other way that this video log is about me is because I was trying to think about different angles on the whole Wikileaks Julian Assange story that haven't been discussed yet. And I was thinking about, well, in the early 90s, went on a lot of diplomatic missions, probably 10 or 12. It's when communism was collapsing and they were sending American economic groups in there to help restructure the economy. And I was working on public health insurance programs for all the countries converting over for communism. I mean, it's too bad I wasn't working on public health insurance programs here, but they didn't want anybody doing that here. So I went on a bunch of diplomatic missions with the World Bank. I was a contractor to USAID, so the State Department, and I would check in with the embassy. So I was trying to think, okay, what's the contrarian take on WikiLeaks? And it would be this, and it's an argument I can actually understand. You could make the case that WikiLeaks makes it tougher to conduct diplomacy around the world. And here's why. These cables, these confidential cables that are sent around, that aren't highly confidential, they're not at the top security classification or whatever, but they're very useful because they say things like, well, one of the cables that came out in WikiLeaks basically said Gaddafi's acting a little stranger than usual, and we think he's banging his Ukrainian quote-unquote nurse or whatever. Words along those lines. They didn't, not quite so crudely put. And, that kind of thing is actually very useful information when you're going into different types of diplomatic meetings. So I can see how the WikiLeaks release of these cables is a problem for the president, for Secretary of State Clinton, and for diplomats around the world. Okay, I get that. I get it from a personal experience, and I get it just from common sense. You want to be able to go out and say, the king of, the Arab country you're about to meet with has some crazy ideas, like he'd love to put digital tracking chips in everybody's skin so you know where everybody is all the time. It's nice to get a peek into the head of the person you're dealing with. And by the way, there's no horrible revelation that I saw. Well, there are, so I don't want to get into that. But I can see the argument for not wanting these diplomatic cables to come out. Okay, I will go that far. But here's where I can't go. First of all, it is the job of people who work in places like the State Department to try to keep this information confidential for exactly the reasons I mentioned, because it's useful to them if they can communicate candidly with one another. But it's the job of journalists to get that information out. That's how it works in our system, right? So if you want to work in the State Department, go ahead and do it. I always wanted one of those black diplomatic passports myself. I thought they were really cool, and I used to be really jealous when I'd come back from some Eastern European country with somebody who worked for the State Department or AID, and they'd blow right through with that shiny black passport, and I'd still be stuck in line. So yeah, I mean, plus it can be enormously gratifying and interesting work, so I get it. But the deal is this. We are supposed to be living in a free and open democratic society. So it's your job to try to communicate confidentially about this stuff. It's a reporter's job to try to reveal that information. That's how the system works. That's why they call reporters the fifth estate, because that's how it was supposed to work. You were supposed to be one of the ways in which a democracy functioned. So if you don't like that, it's understandable. But if you start doing things about your not liking that, that create problems, it's not understandable and it's not acceptable. And we have gone way over the line in suppressing these guys, suppressing their civil rights. What is being done to Bradley Manning is horrifying, and Jane Hampshire's been writing about that on Fire Dog Lake. What is being done to Assange himself? I don't know, obviously, about these charges, whether they're true or false, but the shutting down of his bank accounts and so on, it's really frightening. It's really police state stuff. And as frustrating as it must be for the people who run this government, there's absolutely no excuse for it. We have to protect our Constitution at all costs. Let me know if you agree with me and what you think of the beard. Okay, thanks. That's it. Over.